hello, everyone, and welcome to the final session before lunch. This is really a privilege to be here and talk about regional strategies for promoting manufacturing and economic development. The theme today is about the global manufacturing economy and the shifting tides of globalization. But really, if we think about what the building blocks of the manufacturing economy really are, they're at the regional level, and they have been for a long time. So beginning in the early 1900s, we thought of industrial districts, where the key ingredients for successful manufacturing were shared pools of talent, common infrastructure, and the ability for knowledge and innovation to spill over between companies and from universities to firms. And over time, where innovation happened in the United States was also where manufacturing happened in the first half of the 20th century in places like Detroit, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh. And as David Autor showed in a few panels ago, those capabilities at the regional level have really been in decline for quite some time. But over the past 10 or so years, many regions, Massachusetts included, have been working to rebuild manufacturing capabilities and the ties between innovation and manufacturing. So there are some really positive stories from across the country. We've studied places like Ames, Iowa, where there's a strong relationship between Iowa State University and the manufacturing community that's led to extraordinary productivity and wage growth in that region. We've also looked at places like Columbus, Indiana, where the role of Cummins engine has been attracting foreign direct investment, also leading to those types of growth. And today, we're really privileged to feature what's been happening in our great Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And I'm here with Secretary Yvonne Howe, who's the Secretary of Economic Development for the Commonwealth, and Sienna Lease, who manages venture development for Mass Ventures and works on driving startup activity. So I'm very excited to be with both of you today and to learn more about your work. And maybe if we could just kick it off by talking about what your kind of the key priorities of your agenda are when you're thinking about economic development and manufacturing in the Commonwealth. And then we'll go to you, Sienna.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Ben, for is this on? Can people hear me? I'm also loud, so. Anyways, but thank you so much, Ben, for your organization of this awesome conference. This is like all of my favorite things. So I'm a manufacturing nerd. I actually started out my business career spending a lot of time in manufacturing, and nothing makes me happier than walking a plant floor. So I love this space and have probably visited, I don't know, probably at least hundreds, if not even more, manufacturing facilities all around the world of all different kinds. So I'm thrilled to be here. And also very honored to be in this role, serving our state and leading economic development. So I just had my 4-month mark last week, so I'm still learning a ton and realizing just how many great things we have here in Massachusetts, but also how much opportunity we have. So as we think about economic development and the role of manufacturing, first of all, I think manufacturing is a big priority for us, but not all manufacturing. And so one of the things we are thinking a lot about as we think about economic development is where do we have competitive advantages? Where do we have distinctive strengths that are unique to Massachusetts? We're not a huge state. We can't compete on everything. Where do we have a natural right to win? And manufacturing is important because it creates all kinds of jobs and it creates all kinds of opportunities across regions. And both of those are key guiding principles for us as we think about economic growth. We want every type of human to be successful, PhDs, but also high school graduates and community college graduates and vocational school graduates. And we need Boston and Cambridge to be successful, but we really need all regions to be successful. So manufacturing, I think, is a key component of all of those elements. There's lots of types of manufacturing, and I think there are many types of manufacturing where we are not going to be well positioned. And if we happen to get lucky and have one of those in our state, that's awesome, but I don't know if we should spend a lot of time going after that. So there's lots of manufacturing that is super commoditized. It requires cheap land, super cheap labor, not particularly skilled. It requires cheap energy, and it requires lots and lots of state incentives to get some giant factory to go there. None of those are our strength in Massachusetts. And so I don't think those are going to be the places that we should try to focus. Instead, if I look at what are our key strengths and where we have differentiated advantages, first of all, we have this incredible R&D engine, starting here from MIT and all of our universities across the state. We have a lot of intellectual property. And we have a pretty high-skilled workforce. Our K-12 public education and all of our community colleges and vocational schools, we have a talented workforce. And I think having been a CEO, a CFO, a COO, and run companies myself, there's a big advantage to not having to get on a plane to fly to a factory. Having the ability to drive and have your engineers sit next to your ops folks and tweak things and test things and prototype things, there's a huge advantage. And there's lots of parts of our state where we do have today, and we could have more opportunities for manufacturing that's all drivable. And so I think about those areas, and the two areas probably three areas I'm most excited about exploring. And this is actually an interesting time for us, because once every 4 years, we're mandated by state legislature to do a formal economic development plan. So it's part of our Massachusetts process. That year is right now. And what I said to the governor is, if we have to do an economic development plan anyways, if we're required to do it, we might as well make it awesome. So we need a plan. And so we are really taking it seriously. And we don't want to just create, we're going to create a nice, pretty PowerPoint, but a PowerPoint stuck in a drawer is not going to help any of us. We need to actually make sure that we have something that we all believe in, that we can bring to life. And so as we work on this plan, we just kicked off. We're having regional sessions across the state. Our first one was in Springfield on Friday. Our second one was in Worcester yesterday, and Sienna was there. And the goal of these regional sessions is just to listen to people on what's going on, what are the opportunities, what are the ideas, and most of all, what should we be doing as a state to support the economy. So as we do these sessions and as we do the analysis, there's three main areas I'm kind of intrigued by for us as we think about the next phase of economic development, around manufacturing in particular. So one is, we have an incredible legacy of advanced manufacturing here. So if you look at the fact that we have Lincoln Labs and MITRE and MIT and Harvard and UMass and all of our WPI, all of our research universities and institutions, plus we have very large legacy kind of successful public companies, Raytheon, Analog Devices, Applied Materials, BAE. We have a lot of large global leaders in very advanced technologies here that are very specialized, very niche applications for defense, for industrial, for aerospace. So they're not commodity. There's less competition. They have higher margins, which all makes it, and it needs a skilled workforce. It needs the R&D. So that all plays to our strengths. And we have a bunch of startups and a bunch of workforce skills going on around the state. And we have a bunch of medium-sized regional companies that, again, play these niche roles across advanced manufacturing. So very excited about advanced manufacturing, in particular, because in this time, we have a unique moment with the federal government offering $250 billion in the CHIPS and Science Act focused on advanced manufacturing. So we're working together as Team Massachusetts across all of these different players to go after those opportunities to support advanced manufacturing. So that's section one. Section two, maybe a little bit less relevant for this group, but I think the next phase for us in life sciences is not just to invent the patents and the drugs here, but to manufacture them here. We've lost a lot of the manufacturing to places like North Carolina. They've been much more aggressive at building the workforce for biomanufacturing. It's time for us now to catch up. So second one is life sciences, biomanufacturing. And the third one that I know the least about is really around climate tech. We have a lot of amazing startups here, and we want to be a leader in our state anyways on climate. And what I love about climate is there's a software and AI and that component to it, services component, but there's also a physical component. So we were just in Devon's a couple months ago at Commonwealth Fusion. They're leading on fusion energy. That's a huge plant that has physical products. So thinking through what are the parts of climate tech, and offshore wind obviously has a physical component. What are the parts of climate tech that could really bring advanced manufacturing to our state? So those are the three areas I'm intrigued in, but I'd love to, hopefully we have a conversation. I'd love to get your ideas, especially as we work on this plan together. But as we think about the future of Massachusetts, how do we leverage all of our unique strengths to really also build strong manufacturing in the places where we have a right to win? So that's way longer than you wanted.
No, that's great.
But
no, that's
hopefully kicks us off.
And Sienna, just Secretary Howe mentioned about the strength in startups in Massachusetts. I know your role is in venture development, and there's been a decline over time in the share of new manufacturing startups, and it's very hard to scale a manufacturing startup. So I wonder, given that your role in venture development and driving startup growth isn't directly focused on manufacturing, how you see your work as contributing to that economic development strategy that the Secretary talked about.
Absolutely. I will say humbly that one of the things that we've been most excited about in your 120 days, I think, in the position is we're able to finally really push our mission. And so for those of you that aren't familiar with Mass Ventures, we are a quasi-public venture capital firm that was founded 45 years ago. I know that because that's my age. But, and so really we were focused to drive technology in the Commonwealth. What's exciting about that when you look at the evolution of Mass Ventures is that is now focused on deep tech. And so much of the intersection of deep tech you find it in manufacturing. So it's artificial intelligence, which is not our topic today, but that's a huge issue when you look at scaling manufacturing and facilities, et cetera. But it also extends to climate tech. It extends to a lot of the areas that we're focused here in the university that we are looking to push. The other thread, I would say, that's really important to us as an organization is academic startups. And so myself, I came from the institution down the river, and people leave. And people leave for lots of reasons. But when you really look at deep tech startups, they're leaving because it might be more attractive to go to a Kentucky, a North Carolina, to a California to grow their business. And so while we are creating, or we are essentially the petri dish for these ideas that are changing the world really for decades and decades, we are not keeping those organizations within the state. And that's where we're so excited to work with Secretary Howe in fielding that. And that's when you get to manufacturing, while we are not directly involved in the funding of manufacturing as a resource to our academic startups, it's to help them identify what resources they need throughout the state. It might be, and it very well may be, as we learned and we know in regions like central Massachusetts, we were in Worcester yesterday, I was in North Adams last week, is there's enormous capacity throughout the state to house people here. There's enormous interest, and it's impossible to talk about manufacturing without talking about workforce development. And workforce development, there was a stat that we heard in the last, I think, 6 months of, they did a poll of Boston public school parents. They said, what's biotech? 70% didn't know what they meant. So how are you gonna bring along a workforce if the general population doesn't even know what you're talking about? And so while we're talking about facilities, and for us, while we're guiding our deep tech companies through the phase of manufacturing for devices, for the technology that they're building, it's also about bringing along the people. And so I would say where my personal job and my focus is about people. And that's where I think Secretary Howe and I agree and enjoy our conversations, because it really comes down to bringing along the entire state and the entire Commonwealth.
Can I just riff on a couple things?
Please,
So first of all, we're so lucky to have Sienna and Mass Ventures as our quasi-partner here, and this is one of the unique things about our state. Our quasis like Mass Ventures and Mass Tech are able to work closely with us, but also be a lot more nimble than some of the state bureaucracy sometimes can be. So we partner very closely together. A couple of things. One is, the other area that is linked to advanced manufacturing that I didn't mention is we also have an incredible legacy in robotics. So if you look at iRobot, Amazon Robotics, global headquarters is here, based on Kiva Systems, and just Teradyne. There's so many things around robotics. And I think, right now you can't have a conversation with anybody in venture without talking about AI. And AI is, I think, going to take over everything. But here in Massachusetts, one thing I'm excited about is how do we think about AI combined with hardware and advanced manufacturing in places like robotics and chips and science and all of that. So that's one thing that I failed to mention, but I'm very intrigued by for a place that we can really lead and win in the future. The other thing I would say that Sienna mentioned that's really important is this workforce element and how do we bring everyone along. The crazy thing we have is that everywhere we go around the state, you find pockets of things where we have an advanced manufacturing workforce program here, and it does 20 people, it trains 20 people a year. Another one here does 25 people here. We have so many good things that companies are doing and community colleges are doing, and all of our different nonprofits are doing, but it's very hard to navigate. We're like 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 = 1 right now. And so one of the things we're trying to figure out is how do we make things simple? How do we help people figure out what are the paths that I can have? And these are great jobs. Like if you go to these advanced manufacturing paths to work at these companies, these are jobs that are making $25, $30 an hour and higher and have career advancement where you could be making, $60, $70, $80, $100,000 a year with no college degree. And the amount of training for a lot of these jobs is 8 weeks or 12 weeks. You can do it at night. But we're not making it easy for people. So one of the things we've been discussing is how do we take all the little seeds we have and put them together and make it simple so it's 1 + 1 + 1 = 1,000. And we can punch above our weight and really highlight all the stuff we're doing. And the same thing for employers. So the conversation I have a lot in the state now is to say, I used to run a company, and my whole life prior now has been in the private sector. If you're running a company, you don't wake up and you don't say, oh, today's Tuesday. Like, is today Tuesday? I think it's today's Tuesday.
It's Tuesday here.
Okay. So you don't wake up and you say, today's Tuesday. How am I going to help Massachusetts today? Like, if you're a CEO, that's not your job. If you're a CEO or CFO or COO, your job is, how do I make sure my customers are happy? How do I make sure my employees are happy? And how do I grow my shareholder value? That's your job. I get that. And I would never want any company in Massachusetts to not do that. You should be doing that. However, the conversation I've been having with companies is, look, give us a shot. Because my job is to convince every company to start here, to stay here, to expand here, and to become a world leader here in Massachusetts. That's my job. So before you decide to just go to North Carolina or Kentucky, at least come have a conversation with us, because we have so many things we can offer, and how do we put those together, again, in a simple way to make the case, and maybe we won't win all of them, but at least I think we win some of them, to make the case for you to stay here in Massachusetts. And we have a lot of success stories. There's so many companies now that I've talked to where their headquarters in Cambridge or Somerville or Boston, and then their factory is in Norwood or Marlborough or Bedford or Devens or Worcester or Pittsfield. And so how do we kind of build on those successes? And just yesterday I had a call with the CEO where this is crazy. Other states are being very competitive. So we have a manufacturing company out, advanced manufacturing company out in Western Mass, and my counterpart, the person who does my job in North Carolina, flew to Western Mass to go visit this company to convince them to move to North Carolina. Like, come on, like what? You're like, well, this is game on. Like, you don't do that to us. Like, we're gonna fight for this. So I called this company and said, do not move to North Carolina without talking to us. I'm gonna come visit you next week, and let's talk about what you need to stay here. But like, this is the game we're trying to compete in and to win. Like, we have so much good stuff to offer. We just need to make it simple, and we need to be proactive on having these conversations.
So what's your pitch? But what's your pitch when a company says, well, I'm thinking about moving to North Carolina? What are the tools that you might use, or what's the pitch of how you can connect them to all the other resources that the state has?
I mean, this is a great question. First of all, one of the things we're doing is we're creating a kind of a systematic, uniform pitch, because right now everyone is working off different things. Second of all, we're trying to create a much more aligned, segmented approach to companies. Because in the past, I think we did a lot of great things, but we kind of treated, in the state, we kind of said, oh, well, business is business. Well, yeah, it's all business, but like working at a large bank is different than working at a startup. It's really different than working at a farm. It's really different than working at a hairdresser. It's different working at these are all business, but they're very different. So our team is trying to be much more focused and segmented. So we've realigned our internal team to be segmented by type of business, and then we have now some dedicated people to different types of businesses. So we can create customized pitches. And the other thing I think is we want to create a one-stop where you shouldn't, if you're a company, you have a full-time job. You're running your company. You shouldn't have to go like onto 12,000 state websites with 8,000 applications, filling out forms, trying to figure out what state programs there are. This should be super easy. You go to one place to say, hey, I'm a company. I'm a startup, I'm a big company, I'm a farm, whatever it is, and I want to stay in Massachusetts, but I'm struggling. Here are my issues. It's on us to then say, here's the menu of things that we have. Let us customize the right package for you. So what's the overall pitch, though? The overall pitch is a couple things. One is, first is that every company that I know, and I've been involved in so many, it all starts with talent, right? We all know if you have the best people and working together in the right way on the right things, everything good comes out of that. That is our strength. So first of all, we have the world's best brains coming to study here. So that is this is the goose that's laying so many of our golden eggs here, is all of the brains that are all coming here and have developed all this intellectual property and have this incredible, vibrant, intellectual place. And then that extends to the rest of our population. We have a very strong K-12 system, and we have a very extensive education system. So if you want talent of any kind, you start here. And I don't think people should take that for granted. I just talked to the CEO of a company, and they moved to Texas because they thought it would be cheap. I mean, it is cheaper. And then they realized they were having way more turnover, way more quality issues, way more defects, harder time training people. So it looks cheaper when you look at it purely per hour, but it's actually not good for your business. And so how do we make the case that, look, to really have the best talent and the best kind of company, starting here makes a ton of sense. The other thing I would say is, we do have a lot of programs that we offer. We're probably not going to be the cheapest, but we do have a lot of grants, tax incentives, all kinds of research opportunities, and all kinds of workforce opportunities. We just make that more simple. The last thing I will say, and this came up not from me, came up from a panel I was listening to where it was at a Mass Bio event. It was a panel where they asked someone, why do you stay in Massachusetts? And this panelist said it. She said, well, we want to attract and retain the best people for our company. And more people are making choices about where they want to live and where they feel comfortable raising their family. So we have a great educational system here. We have great communities here, but also it matters to employees that they live in a state that believes in data and climate change, that believes in reproductive rights, that believes in letting people love who they want to love, that actually is humane and takes care of each other. And so those set of values, I think, are increasingly becoming a differentiator. That is not the same for all these other places. So you might save some money, But you might find employees who don't feel comfortable raising their families or living there. And so that's part of our pitch now as well. And Governor Healy, as you know, is very committed to those values. So we'll get sharper on it, but we'll put it out together. But I think we have a strong pitch to make. We're probably never going to be the cheapest, but with all the other advantages we have and being part of this ecosystem, I think we can win a lot of these companies.
May I add to that a little bit? And I just want to say, I call it my personal Why Massachusetts campaign.
Love it.
You know, and I'm somebody, I love Team Massachusetts, and I come to a lot of events with you, and it is about Team Massachusetts. And I think a lot of us come into the Harvards, the MITs, to the WPIs, et cetera, coming in thinking we're going to get what we need to get, and then we leave. And that is really the value proposition that I think this administration, Secretary Howe, her team, our team, are really committed to, is keeping you here. And so by providing access, which is talking to us after this conversation, it's all of those dialogues to understand, again, what is it that's going to take you out. I think when you look at, and one of our huge propositions with Mass Ventures is diverse teams lead innovation, they lead productivity, they lead profitability. And diverse means maybe your whole founding team might not be from MIT, pull a Harvard person in, but it's, you know, it's create diversity. And I moved back personally a year and a half ago to Massachusetts, and it is all of the things that the Secretary has described. And so it's seen beyond the academic startup, really heaven that we have here. My own startup most recently was with the Media Lab. And it was wonderful and it was great, but we needed to expand beyond that really to gain the innovation that we wanted to achieve. And that time it was a COVID-related business. And so I think that's really the piece that I think we forget sometimes in the academic world is, I call it the fluff, but it's the marketing, it's the communication, and it's the people again. And so we need to be able to communicate that piece and attract people here instead of thinking that we have to go elsewhere to drive that. And if there are pieces, I think in other states, whether it's a tax incentive, whether there's different, attractive measures that are being used flying into Western Mass to bring you out, you now have an accessible administration and an accessible environment in that where we want you to grow here. And that's what's so interesting when you tie it back to manufacturing is we have the buildings, we have the space, we have these, Worcester, I've always heard the stat, never thought of it. I was one of the people, we talked about it yesterday, I had this old perception of Worcester from 20 years ago being an undergraduate. You go to Worcester now, I was at WPI yesterday, and it was beautiful. It was the most beautiful town. I texted a friend saying, your daughter should come here, not knowing it was one of the leading gaming institutions in the country. Yeah. And so those are the types of things that I think through, and this is where I put out Mass Ventures, where I think we're a great support as a quasi, is convening collaboration. And so through convening, and it's multi-parts really, it's the government, it's quasis, it's university, and then it's community. And so if we can bring together those pieces, and all of those include the people, that's who we're serving, I think we really get to this very interesting place in Massachusetts where I'd really be challenged to come up with somewhere better. And I come from California. So I say that
and
honestly.
One of the through lines here that's interesting, and you talked, Secretary Howe, about not being able to compete on price, and I feel like offering a lower cost of doing business is very measurable, but offering a benefit of being near innovation or near startups is much harder to measure, but there might be significant upside that you almost need to trust that this is going to deliver down the road.
Well, and I think we've seen it work. So I was visiting a life sciences startup, and life sciences is the perfect kind of case study for us because we took our amazing universities and research, we added it to our healthcare system, which are our world-leading hospitals, and then we have an incredible, rich, vibrant ecosystem of venture firms here. And then the state convened and invested in 2008 with Deval Patrick, and we have this incredible life sciences, world-leading hub here. But I was visiting this startup, and the founder is French, the head of HR is from Ireland, the CFO is Israeli, and their team is from all over the place. And usually when I go out and visit, people always have the same things. Like, why don't we have better housing? Why don't we have better transportation? Why does the workforce stuff, the weather, there's a whole list of things. And we get it. I mean, we're working on all of them.
Can't control that one.
Can't control the weather, but we're working on all these things. But they didn't talk about any of those things. And I said, well, why are you guys here? None of you are from Massachusetts, and there's all these things. And they're like, no, we're in life sciences. We have to be here. If you want to be the world leader in life sciences, and the work that they're doing is they're trying to cure some really unique cancer diseases in a very unique way, we have to be here. This is the epicenter, and this is where everybody in our industry, if you want to be leading edge, you're here. That's why we have to focus. It's hard to do that for everything, but if we can pick a couple of these areas where we have a history and we have all the ingredients, how do we become the place where you have to be here? Even if you hate the weather a couple months of the year, you kind of have to be here. And we're never going to be the cheapest, but there's so much other, there's so much, other things that there's a very compelling reason that you have to be here. And I think advanced manufacturing and robotics, all of that is one of those areas.
It's terrific. Sienna, Secretary Howe, thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thank you so much, Ben.
Thank you.